Let's bring in Cully Stimson, Heritage Foundation Senior Legal Fellow. Obviously, her frustration is very apparent. We've spoken with her throughout this process. She has maintained her husband's innocence. Cully, what happens now? I mean, we know that they had to go back into the courtroom because he still has this charge against him. As far as sentencing is concerned, we don't know. We'll see how that plays out. But what is next for Eddie Gallagher?
Yeah, what an eloquent defense of her husband for a long period of time. What an amazing woman. He was convicted of the one charge of posing with a corpse. He will be sentenced today. The jury in this particular case sentences him. They could award him no punishment up to 4 months, but since he served a lot of time in pretrial confinement, even if they give him the max, the 4 months, he walks out of the courtroom today. But remember, guys, he now has a federal conviction, which will be carried around with him the rest of his life unless and until the president pardons him, which is the president's prerogative under the Constitution. There's another piece, though. The Navy can try to fire him administratively. And that's when you saw Senior Chief Gallagher and his attorney this morning talk about going to the Special Operations Command and having a conversation with him, because they're going to try to ward that off.
Cully, you've watched this closely. You think the jury got it right?
I'm always loath as a former military judge or a prosecutor defense counsel to say whether they got it right or not, but the jury's verdict should be respected, period. The military justice system worked here. I think the prosecution did, frankly, a terrible job. I think the prosecutor was inexperienced. You could tell that from a lot of different angles. The immunity deal, which went south of them, the medic who testified, who wasn't impeached properly. I'm not even sure an experienced career prosecutor would have even brought these charges in the first place, Bill. I just don't think it would have happened. If it was, we would have seen a lot more, but I just don't think they had the oomph in the investigation, and they certainly didn't have the oomph to convict him.
Not to mention
these no-body homicide cases are hard to prove. They're really hard to prove in the civilian world. In the military world, thousands of miles away, come on, that's tough.
Not to mention the case was almost thrown out because of the prosecution. They had to eventually admit that they did tap the emails. They were leaking to the media. They were monitoring the emails from Eddie Gallagher to his legal team. I mean, this trial has taken a lot of twists and turns throughout. Just finally, as far as what is next for Eddie Gallagher, do you think the president steps in here? What happens?
I don't know what the president's going to do. It's totally within his discretion under the Constitution to pardon him if he wants to. The next battle, I think, for the defense, which they clearly talked about this morning, was going to his command and saying, look, please don't fire this guy. He's suffered enough. And so I think that's the next battle after the sentencing this morning, which, by the way, is just an afterthought.
Gotcha.
Have you, just on a final word here, I heard from some others within the U.S. Navy about the wear and tear of 20 years that this war has taken, the toll it's taken on so many. Have you reflected on that during this trial, Cully?
I have. I've lived through it not only as a JAG, but not the way SEALs have. I mean, the SEALs are the toughest, best trained men in our country. We put them through rigors that most mortals can't go through. And the stress on their families, the stress on their bodies, the stress on their psyche is huge. And we just can't know what they're going through. And so we have to think long and hard about that as we go forward and do an after-action review of what happened here.
Well stated. Thank you, Cully, for coming back. Cully Stimson in Washington.
Thanks, Cully.